The mop bucket wheels squeaked against the polished floor as David pushed it down the empty corridor. Third shift at the Harmony Point Adoption Center meant he cleaned while everyone else slept. He preferred it that way. Quiet. Peaceful. No one asking questions or making small talk. He'd worked here for 3 years now, ever since Rachel died. The job didn't pay much, but it kept him busy. Kept his mind from wandering to the empty apartment waiting for him at shift's end. Tonight was different, though. The annual Finding Families event had run late, and David could still hear voices echoing from the main viewing hall. He wheeled his bucket past the entrance and glanced inside. Rows of small enclosures lined the walls, each one designed for different species requirements. Most stood empty now, their young occupants carried away by happy new parents. David had watched it happen over the years. The cute ones always went first. The ones that looked friendly, that made pleasant sounds, that didn't have too many teeth or claws. His eyes drifted to the far corner where a small purple shape huddled against the transparent barrier. The dragon hatchling. David had seen it arrive 6 months ago on a transport from the outer colonies. Sole survivor of some disaster. The details were kept quiet, but David heard things while he mopped. People talked like he wasn't there. The little creature's scales shimmered under the overhead lights. Its wings, barely developed, pressed tight against its body. Golden eyes stared at nothing in particular. David had watched dozens of families approach that enclosure today. He'd seen their faces change when they read the species designation. Driven, Death World Predator. Grows to 15 feet. Lifespan of 8 centuries. They'd move on quickly, drawn to the safer options. The furry ones. The ones that purred. Still here, I see. Director Walsh's voice made David turn. The tall Centaurian looked exhausted, her face tendrils drooping. I thought everyone had gone home. Just finishing up, David said, gesturing to his mop. Walsh sighed and walked to the dragon's enclosure. The hatchling didn't even look up. Poor thing. I'll have to arrange a transfer to the containment facility on Outpost 7. They have the equipment to handle dangerous species there. Containment? David frowned. It's just a baby. A baby that will become one of the most lethal creatures in known space. Walsh tapped her datapad. Driven aren't pets, David. They're apex predators from a world where everything tries to kill everything else. Even their own kind barely tolerate raising them. I can't in good conscience place this hatchling with an unprepared family. David watched the small dragon curl tighter into itself. Something in his chest ached. He knew that posture. He'd seen it in mirrors after Rachel's funeral. The way someone looks when they're trying to disappear. What if someone was prepared? The words came out before he could stop them. Walsh's tendrils straightened in surprise. Excuse me? What if someone wanted to adopt it? What would they need? David. Walsh's voice softened. I know you're lonely. I know losing your wife was hard. But this isn't the answer. Driven requires specialized care, enormous resources, and knowledge we simply don't have. There's never been a successful cross-species adoption with this species. Certainly not with a human. But it's possible? Legally. Walsh studied him for a long moment. You're serious. I'm asking questions. She pulled up files on her datapad, scrolling through pages of data. The requirements are extensive. Special diet that costs more than your annual salary. Environmental controls. Safety measures for when it develops its breath weapon. Behavioral training. Legal liability waivers that would make your head spin. And that's assuming you could even bond with it. Driven imprint on their primary caregiver. If that bond doesn't form, the hatchling becomes violent and unpredictable. But people have done it. Other species have raised them. A handful. Usually other Death World species with similar psychology. Never a human. Our lifespans don't even match up, David. You'll be dead before this creature reaches maturity. David looked back at the hatchling. It had shifted slightly, one golden eye now watching them. Something in that gaze looked ancient and young at the same time. Scared. So scared. Can I meet it? He asked. David, just meet it. That's all I'm asking. Walsh's tendrils twitched in what might have been frustration or resignation. Tomorrow. Come by during business hours, and I'll arrange a supervised introduction. But I'm telling you right now, this is a terrible idea. You're a maintenance worker living in a studio apartment. You have no experience with younglings, let alone one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Tomorrow then, David said quietly. Walsh left shaking her head. David should have gone back to his cleaning, should have finished his shift and gone home. Instead, he walked to the dragon's enclosure and knelt down. The hatchling watched him with those enormous golden eyes. Up close, David could see it trembling. Not from cold, from fear. "Hey there," he whispered. "I know you probably don't understand me, but I wanted you to know someone sees you. You're not invisible." The dragon tilted its head, studying him. "I know what it's like," David continued, surprised by the tightness in his throat. "Being the one nobody wants. The one everyone walks past. It hurts, doesn't it?" The hatchling made a small sound, somewhere between a chirp and a whimper. David pressed his hand against the barrier. The dragon stared at it, but didn't move closer. "I'll see you tomorrow," David promised. "We'll figure this out together." He stood and returned to his mop bucket. Behind him, he didn't see the small dragon uncurl slightly, golden eyes following him until he disappeared around the corner. The conference room felt too small. David sat across from Director Walsh, a grumpy-looking Terran xenobiologist named Dr. Pierce, and someone from the legal department whose name he'd already forgotten. All three stared at him like he'd announced plans to juggle plasma grenades. "Let me be very clear," Dr. Pierce said, pulling up a holographic display. "This is what you're proposing to raise." The image showed a fully grown Dreven, wings spread wide, breathing a column of white-hot flame. 15 feet tall, carnivorous, territorial, capable of melting through reinforced steel with their breath weapon alone. "That develops at age 7, David said. He'd spent all night researching. "Oh good, you have 7 years before it can kill you by accident," Dr. Pierce said dryly. "That's very reassuring." Walsh held up a hand. "Dr. Pierce, we agreed to present the facts, not editorialize. The facts are insane enough without my commentary." But the doctor pulled up another chart. Dreven hatchlings require a diet high in calcium and trace minerals. We're talking specialized supplements that cost roughly 3,000 credits per month. Their metabolism runs hot, so environmental temperature needs to stay between 75 and 85 degrees. They grow fast, which means you'll need to expand living space every 6 months for the first 5 years. David pulled out his datapad and started taking notes. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Chun, even if you could afford the care requirements, the liability issues are substantial. If this creature injures someone, you're personally responsible. The station insurance won't cover it. You'd be ruined financially. What about the emotional requirements?" David asked. "The bonding process Dr. Pierce mentioned?" The xenobiologist's expression softened slightly. "That's actually the one thing working in your favor. Dreven bond intensely with their primary caregiver, regardless of species. It's an evolutionary adaptation from their home world where younglings needed absolute loyalty to survive. If the bond forms properly, the hatchling will be devoted to you. Protective even, and if it doesn't form, then you have an increasingly large predator living in your quarters that sees you as either prey or competition." Dr. Pierce closed the hologram. "Mr. Chun, I admire whatever impulse brought you here. I do. But this is beyond what any human has attempted. We have no guidelines, no success stories to reference. You'd be making it up as you go. People do that with kids all the time," David said quietly. Walsh smiled at that. "He has a point. Human children don't develop the ability to breathe fire," the lawyer muttered. David looked at each of them. "What if I agree to all the safety measures? Take the training courses, sign the waivers, set up proper environmental controls. What if I do everything exactly right? There's no guarantee the hatchling will even accept you," Dr. Pierce warned. "It's been in isolation for months. Trust issues are likely. And Dreven communicate partly through pheromones and body language that humans can't naturally read. You'll be starting at a severe disadvantage. So I'll learn." David leaned forward. "Look, I'm not rich. I'm not educated. I don't have connections or resources. But I have time, and I have patience, and I'm willing to put in the work. That hatchling deserves a chance. Everyone deserves a chance." The room fell silent. Walsh exchanged glances with the others. I'll need to run this past the full council, she said finally. But I can arrange an initial meeting. Supervised. We'll see if there's any rapport between you two. When? This afternoon. But David, I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. This isn't a temporary commitment. Dreven live for 8 centuries. Even if you dedicate your entire life to this creature, you'll only be there for a fraction of its existence. That's a heavy burden to place on a youngling, knowing their parent will die while they're still essentially a child themselves. David thought about Rachel, about the 5 years they'd had together before the transport accident. Not enough time. Never enough time. But those years still mattered. They still counted. Better some time with someone who cares than a lifetime in containment, he said to the doctor. Pierce shook his head, but didn't argue. The lawyer started pulling up waiver forms. Walsh just looked at David with something that might have been respect or concern. Possibly both. 3 hours later, David stood outside the interaction room. Through the observation window, he could see the small purple dragon huddled in the corner, wings tucked tight. A medical team waited nearby with sedative equipment. Just in case, Walsh stood beside him. Last chance to reconsider. I'm sure. The hatchling's name is Sara. The rescue team found it in the wreckage of a colony ship. We don't know what happened to its parents or clutchmates. As far as we can tell, it's been alone since hatching. David's chest tightened. Alone from the very beginning. No wonder it looked so terrified. I'm going in, he said. The door opened with a soft hiss. Sara's head snapped up, golden eyes wide. David stepped inside slowly, keeping his movements gentle and predictable. He sat down on the floor about 10 feet away, legs crossed. For a long time, neither of them moved. Hi, Sara, David said softly. My name is David. I know you're scared. I know you don't understand what's happening. But I'm not here to hurt you. The dragon's nostrils flared, scenting him. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of fruit he'd grabbed from the cafeteria. He'd read that young Drevens sometimes ate fruit to supplement their diet. He sat on the floor between them and slid it closer. Sara stared at the offering, then at David, then back at the fruit. It's okay, David whispered. It's for you. 20 minutes passed. David didn't move, didn't push, just sat there, breathing calmly, letting Sara get used to his presence. Finally, the little dragon crept forward, one careful step at a time. It snatched the fruit and retreated quickly, watching David the entire time, but it didn't run. And when David smiled, Sara tilted its head, studying him with something that looked almost like curiosity. 3 months had changed everything. David's studio apartment now looked like a cross between a reptile habitat and a disaster zone. Heat lamps mounted in the corners. Calcium supplements lined the kitchen counter. Scratches marked the walls where Sara had tested her claws. The security deposit was definitely not coming back. David didn't care. He sat on the floor sorting through his datapad, while Sara climbed the specially reinforced shelving unit he'd installed last week. The dragon had grown. She was nearly the size of a medium dog now. All gangly limbs and oversized wings she hadn't quite figured out how to fold properly. Careful up there, David called. Sara chirped at him. A sound he'd learned meant she was happy. She'd started making different vocalizations, and David had been cataloging them obsessively. Chirps for contentment, rumbles for hunger, a sharp bark when she was startled, and a low, mournful keen when he left for work that broke his heart every single time. The door chime rang. David groaned. Probably another complaint from the neighbors, but it wasn't a neighbor. Inspector Graves from Station Child Services stood in the hallway, datapad in hand. Behind her, 2 security officers waited. Mr. Chun, surprise inspection. David's stomach dropped, but he stepped aside. Come in. Graves entered, her eyes immediately scanning the modified apartment. She made notes on her datapad. The security officers stayed by the door, hands resting casually on their stunners. Sara scrambled down from her perch and rushed to David's side, pressing against his leg. She'd grown protective of him over the past months. Anyone who approached David too quickly got a warning hiss. Easy, girl, David murmured, resting a hand on her head. It's okay. I've received 17 complaints about noise disturbances, Graves said, still typing. Property damage. concerns about safety. And yesterday, a report came in that the creature burned you. David reflexively touched his bandaged forearm. It was an accident. She's developing her breath weapon early. She didn't mean to. She? Graves raised an eyebrow. Yes, she. Sara is female. Dr. Pierce confirmed it last week. Graves knelt down, studying Sara. The dragon pressed closer to David, golden eyes wary. She's bigger than the projections suggested she'd be at this age. She's healthy, growing well. I've been following all the dietary guidelines. At significant personal cost, I imagine. Graves tooth. Mr. Chun, your financial records show you've spent over 15,000 credits in the past 3 months. That's more than your annual salary. You've taken out loans, maxed out your credit accounts. This isn't sustainable. I'm managing. Are you? Graves gestured around the apartment. You're living in what amounts to a modified cage. You work 60 hours a week just to afford basic care. And now you're injured. When does this stop being noble and start being reckless? David's jaw tightened. She needs me, or you need her. Graves' voice wasn't unkind. Mr. Chun, I've read your file. I know you lost your wife. I understand you're grieving. But using this creature to fill that void isn't fair to either of you. That's not what this is, isn't it? Graves pulled up something on her datapad. I have a facility that specializes in driven care. Professional handlers, proper equipment, other dragons for socialization. She'd thrive there. Sara made a low, anxious sound. She picked up on the tension in David's voice, even if she couldn't understand the words. No, David said firmly. She stays with me. Mr. Chun, be reasonable. Look at this objectively. You're one person trying to do the work of an entire team. Sooner or later, something is going to go wrong. What happens when she gets bigger? When her breath weapon fully develops? When her territorial instincts kick in during adolescence? We'll handle it together. Graves Saif. I'm recommending a formal custody hearing. The council needs to determine if this arrangement is in the best interest of the creature and the safety of the station. You'll be notified of the date. After they left, David sank onto the floor. Sara climbed into his lap immediately, far too big for it now, but trying anyway. She nuzzled against his chest, making worried sounds. It's okay, he whispered, wrapping his arms around her. I'm not letting them take you. I promise. But even as he said it, doubt crept in. What if Graves was right? What if he was being selfish? Sara deserved the best possible life, and maybe he couldn't give her that. Maybe love wasn't enough. Sara pulled back and looked at him with those huge golden eyes. She placed one clawed hand on his cheek, gentle despite the sharp points. Then she made a sound he'd never heard before, almost like she was trying to speak. Tried to tell him something. David pulled up his datapad and started researching. If there was going to be a hearing, he needed to be prepared. Needed evidence that this was working, that Sara was happy and healthy despite the challenges, that he found forums dedicated to cross-species adoption, support groups for non-traditional families. And buried in the archives, he discovered something interesting. A single case study from 40 years ago. A Driven elder who had been raised by a species called the Volney. The study emphasized that Driven didn't bond based on species compatibility, that it bonded based on emotional connection. Heart bonds, the paper called them, bonds that transcended biology. David looked at Sara, who had curled up beside him, her tail wrapped around his waist. She trusted him completely, chose him every day, and he'd chosen her. Whatever happened at the hearing, he had to make them understand. This wasn't about one species raising another. It wasn't about having the perfect setup or unlimited resources. It was about family. And family wasn't something you could measure on a datapad or evaluate in an inspection. David started making notes for his testimony. He had 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks to prove that sometimes the best home wasn't the one with the most credentials, that IT was the one with the most love. The council chamber was packed. David hadn't expected so many people. Representatives from a dozen species filled the observation gallery, all there to watch his fitness as a parent get dissected and judged. He sat alone at the respondents' table, hands folded to hide their shaking. Sara waited in a holding room nearby. They'd been separated an hour ago, and he could still hear her distressed cries echoing through the corridors. It took everything in him not to go to her. Council Speaker Torvin, a dignified Paxian with silver fur, called the hearing to order. We convene to determine the custody status of the Dreven juvenile currently in the care of David Chun, human resident of Harmony Point Station. Inspector Graves presented first. She laid out her case methodically. David's limited financial resources, the 17 noise complaints, the property damage, medical reports showing his burn injury. The respondent has demonstrated admirable dedication, Graves concluded. But dedication alone does not constitute adequate care. This creature requires resources and expertise Mr. Chen simply cannot provide. For the safety of the station and the well-being of the juvenile, I recommend transfer to the Dreven Conservation Facility on Outpost 7. One of the council members, a stern-looking Centaurian, nodded. The facility has excellent credentials. It's also a glorified zoo, David said before he could stop himself. Speaker Torvin fixed him with a look. You'll have your chance to speak, Mr. Chun. The prosecution called witnesses. Neighbors who testified about frightening roars at night. A merchant who claimed Sara had hissed at his daughter. Dr. Pierce, who reluctantly admitted that cross-species Dreven raising had an extremely low success rate. Through it all, David took notes and tried to stay calm. But his heart was pounding so hard he thought everyone must hear it. Finally, Speaker Torvin gestured to him. Mr. Chun, you may present your defense. David stood on shaky legs and walked to the center of the chamber. No lawyer, no fancy arguments, just him and the truth. I'm not rich, he began. I don't have advanced degrees or special training. I can't give Sara everything a proper facility could give her. I know that, but I can give her something they can't. He pulled up images on the main display. Photos he'd taken over the past 3 months. Sara sleeping curled against his side. Sara playing with a ball of crumpled paper. Sara carefully touching a flower he'd brought home. Her expression full of wonder. I can give her a family, David said quietly. I know what the statistics say. I know the risks. But I also know what I see every day. Sara isn't just surviving with me. She's happy. She's growing. She's learning to trust. And that matters. Emotional appeals are not evidence, the Centaurian council member said. Then look at the medical records, David countered. Dr. Pierce's own reports show Sara is healthy, growing at an optimal rate. No signs of stress or behavioral problems. The burn on my arm? She was startled by a loud noise and her breath weapon activated by reflex. She immediately tried to help me, brought me water, stayed by my side while I bandaged it. That's not aggression. That's a child who made a mistake and felt bad about it. He took a breath. I grew up in foster care. 17 different homes before I aged out of the system. I know what it's like to be the kid nobody wants. The one who's too much trouble, too expensive, too different. And I remember the ones who tried. The families who didn't have much, but gave what they could. They're the ones who mattered. Not the ones with perfect houses and credentials. The ones who showed up. The chamber was silent. David felt his throat tighten. Sara chose me, he said. In that first meeting, she could have rejected me like she'd rejected everyone else. But she didn't. She took that piece of fruit from my hand, and she took a chance. All I'm asking is that you let me take the same chance on her. A door burst open. Sara charged into the chamber, having apparently broken free from her handlers. She was growing fast, now the size of a large dog, scales gleaming purple under the lights. Several people in the gallery gasped and moved back. Sara ignored them all. She ran straight to David and pressed against him, trembling. David knelt and wrapped his arms around her. It's okay, he whispered. I'm here. Security moved forward, but Speaker Torvin held up a hand, stopping them. The entire council watched as Sara tucked her head under David's chin, making soft, desperate sounds. David just held her, murmuring reassurances. Separation anxiety, Dr. Pierce said quietly from his seat. The bond is strong. The main display flickered. An incoming holo transmission. Speaker Torvin authorized it, and a figure appeared. An elderly Dreven, scales faded to pale lavender with age, wings folded with dignity. Council speaker. The elder's voice resonated through the chamber. I'm Elder Shrey of the Dreven Conclave. I have been monitoring this proceeding with interest. Elder Shrey. Torvin inclined his head respectfully. Your input is welcome. I was raised by the Volney, Shrey said. A species not my own. They were small, fragile, with lifespans shorter than my adolescence. Many said it would not work, that I needed my own kind, but they gave me something more important than shared biology. They gave me belonging. Shrey's golden eyes focused on David and Sara. What I see here is a true heart bond. This human has done everything correctly by our standards. He has shown patience, respect, and unwavering commitment. The juvenile has accepted him, chosen him. To separate them now would be cruel to both. The chamber erupted in whispers. Speaker Torvin called for order. The council will deliberate, Torvin announced. Mr. Chun, please wait outside with the juvenile. David left with Sara pressed against his side. In the hallway, he sank into a chair. Sara climbed into his lap, too big for it, but trying anyway. 20 minutes later, they were called back in. The council has reached a decision, Speaker Torvin said. Custody is granted to David Chun, conditional upon completion of certified xenobiology courses and regular welfare inspections. Furthermore, Mr. Chun will document his experiences for the purpose of creating guidelines for future cross-species adoptions. David's knees nearly gave out. Sara chirped happily, sensing his relief. They'd won. Against all odds, they'd actually won. 2 years changed everything. Again, David adjusted his collar and looked at himself in the mirror. The interview would start in 10 minutes. Some journalists wanted to talk about his revolutionary approach to cross-species parenting. He still found it weird that people cared. Dad, have you seen my translator? Sara's voice called from her room. She was the size of a small horse now, requiring her own space that David had carved out of what used to be his bedroom. He'd moved to the couch. Small price to pay. On the charging dock, he called back. Sara emerged, the translation device fixed to a collar around her neck. Her scales had deepened to a rich purple, and her wings, while not flight-capable yet, were impressive when fully extended. She learned to fold them properly now, mostly so she didn't knock everything over. Do I have to go to the community center tonight? She asked, settling onto her haunches. Her Dreven vocal cords could produce sounds approximating human speech, but the translator made communication easier. The support group meets every week, Sara. You know this. I know. She paused, claws clicking against the floor. Do we have to go to the Dreven cultural exchange this weekend? David sat down beside her, which now meant he was looking up at her. What's wrong? I thought you were excited about meeting others of your kind. I am. It's just complicated. Talk to me. Sara's tail wrapped around herself, a nervous habit she developed. The other Dreven younglings, they think I'm strange. The way I talk, the way I move, even the way I think. They make fun of how I hold eating utensils. Dragons don't use tools, apparently. But I've always used them because you do. David's heart ached. He'd worried about this. And the humans? They're scared of me. Even the ones in the support group who say they understand. I see how they look at me when I move too fast or my voice gets loud. They can't help it. Sara looked at him with those expressive golden eyes. I don't fit anywhere, Dad. I'm too human for dragons and too dragon for humans. You fit with me, David said quietly. I know, but what about when I'm older? When you... She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. When he died. She meant when he died. Dreven lived for centuries. David had maybe 40 good years left if he was lucky. Sara, look at me. David waited until she did. You're not too much of anything. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. Someone who bridges two worlds. That's not a weakness. That's a strength. It doesn't feel like a strength. Before David could respond, the door chime rang. The journalist had arrived early. David answered it to find a young Terran woman with recording equipment. Mr. Chun? I'm Amy Rodriguez from Cross Species Life magazine. Thanks for agreeing to the interview. They settled in the living area. Sara tried to make herself small in the corner, but there was no hiding a dragon her size. Amy set up her equipment, barely glancing at Sara. David appreciated that. People who treated Sara normally were rare. So, Mr. Chun, You've become something of a celebrity in adoption circles. How does that feel? Weird, mostly. I'm just trying to raise my kid. Your documentation project has helped 12 other families successfully complete cross-species adoptions. That's remarkable. David shrugged. I just write down what works and what doesn't. Other people do the hard part. Speaking of hard parts, there's been some criticism. Other driven in the sector claim you're raising Sara without proper cultural education. How do you respond? David felt Sara tense behind him. We're doing our best to honor her heritage while also acknowledging she's growing up in a multi-species environment. She's learning driven history, customs, language. But she's also learning to exist in the wider galaxy. Both matter. Some say you're creating a dragon who doesn't know what she is. I'm raising a person who knows exactly who she is, David said firmly. Someone who can move between worlds. Someone who can help others understand each other. That's not a failing. That's the future. Amy smiled at that and made notes. The interview continued for another hour. When it ended, Sara still sat in her corner, quiet. That night, David found her on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. Can't sleep? He asked, joining her. Just thinking. About what you said. Being a bridge between worlds. Sara's tail swished slowly. There's another hatchling coming next month. Another driven. The rescue services found it in a bad situation. Foster abuse. It's violent now, they say. Dangerous. No one wants it. David's chest tightened. He knew where this was going. I want to help, Sara said. I know we just got stable. I know it'll be hard. But I remember what it felt like to be unwanted. And I think maybe I could reach this hatchling in ways others can't. Because I understand being different. Sara, that's a huge responsibility. I know. But you took responsibility for me when everyone said it was impossible. You showed me that being different isn't being broken. Maybe I can show this hatchling the same thing. David looked at his daughter, no longer the terrified little creature huddled in that enclosure. She'd grown into someone remarkable, someone compassionate and strong and willing to take risks for others. Okay, he said, we'll talk to Director Walsh tomorrow. See what's involved. But Sara, this has to be a family decision. All of us working together. Sara pressed her head against his shoulder, as close to a hug as their size difference allowed now. Thanks, Dad. For what? For showing me that family isn't about being the same. It's about showing up for each other. No matter what. David wrapped his arms around her neck. This dragon who'd become his whole world. Always, he promised. We always show up. Out in the darkness of space, stars glittered like scattered diamonds. And somewhere in that vast expanse, another lost hatchling waited. Waited for someone to see past the fear and the danger to the scared child underneath. They'd find that hatchling. They'd show what Sara had learned. That being different wasn't a curse. That with patience and love, anyone could find their place. Even dragons raised by humans in 2 small apartments with 2 large hearts. 5 years after the custody hearing, David barely recognized his life. The tiny studio apartment was long gone, replaced by proper family quarters with reinforced walls and high ceilings. Sara had her own room, though she still wandered to his door most nights, seeking comfort from nightmares she couldn't quite explain. The new hatchling had arrived 3 months ago. His name was Ren, and he was everything the reports had warned about. Scarred purple scales, eyes that tracked movement with predatory focus, a tendency to lash out when frightened, which was always. Right now, Ren huddled in the corner of the common room, watching David prepare dinner with barely concealed suspicion. The hatchling was smaller than Sara had been at the same age. Malnutrition, Dr. Pierce had said. Neglect. The previous foster family had kept him in a cage. Ren, would you like to help set the table? David asked gently. The hatchling's lips pulled back, showing teeth. Not quite a snarl, but close. Okay, no problem. Maybe next time. Sara entered from her room, now nearly 10 feet tall with wings that could almost support gliding. She'd started attending the integrated school last year, one of only 3 driven students. It hadn't been easy. She sat down near Ren, not too close, respecting his space. Hey, rough day. Ren didn't respond. Yeah, I get those too, Sara continued, switching to driven language. Her accent was odd, David knew. Learned rather than native. But she was trying. The kids at school asked me today, why eat with utensils? Said real dragons don't do that. I told them real dragons do whatever works for them. Ren's eyes flicked to her, suspicious but curious. You know what the hard part is? Sara said, figuring out who you are when everyone has opinions about who you should be. Dreven say I'm too human. Humans say I'm too Dreven. But Dad taught me something. You want to know what it is? Ren's ears twitched. Listening. Being different isn't being broken. It's just being you. And you get to decide what that means. For the first time since arriving, Ren uncurled slightly. They hurt me, he said, voice rough from disuse. The others said I was bad. Wrong. You're not wrong, Sara said firmly. You're scared. There's a difference. David watched from the kitchen, his throat tight. Sara had grown into someone remarkable. Someone who understood pain and chose compassion anyway. Over the following weeks, progress came in tiny increments. Ren stopped snarling when David approached. Started eating at the table instead of hiding food in his room. Began following Sara around like a shadow, studying how she moved through the world point one evening. David found them both on the observation deck. Sara was teaching Ren about constellations, pointing out stars with her wing. That one's called the Hunter, she explained. Humans named it after one of their myths. Dragons have different names for the same stars. Dad says that's what makes the galaxy interesting. Different perspectives on the same things. Ren tilted his head. Which names are right? All of them. None of them. Does it matter? Sara looked at the smaller dragon. The stars are still beautiful no matter what you call them. David approached slowly. Both dragons turned to look at him. Mind if I join? Dad's the one who taught me about stars, Sara told Ren. He's not very good at pronouncing the Dreven names, though. Hey, Dreven is 17 sounds human vocal cords can't make, David protested. I do my best. Ren made a sound that might have been a laugh. Small. But there. The formal adoption ceremony for Ren took place 6 months later. The observation gallery was packed again, but this time with supporters rather than skeptics. Families from David's support group. Former critics who become allies. Dr. Pierce, who'd become a friend over the years. Director Walsh, now retired but present for the occasion, smiled as she handed David the official documentation. Never thought I'd see the day, she murmured. You've started something remarkable, David. Sara stepped forward with a traditional Dreven bonding stone. She'd learned the ceremony from Elder Shrey, who watched via HoloLink, too old now to travel, but determined to witness this moment. Ren, Sara said in formal Dreven, I present this stone as symbol of family bond. You're pack. You're blood chosen. You are ours. Ren accepted the stone with shaking claws. Then, in a move that surprised everyone, he pressed his forehead to Sara's, a gesture of trust and affection. The ceremony concluded with David officially recognized as Ren's guardian. As they left the council chambers, Ren walked between David and Sara, no longer cowering, no longer afraid. That night, David sat in his quarters updating the documentation project. His notes had helped 40 families now. 40 children who'd found homes across species barriers. A soft knock came at his door. Both dragons entered, Sara having to duck now to fit through the doorway. Can't sleep? David asked. We wanted to talk to you about something, Sara said. Ren nodded beside her. What's on your minds? We've been thinking about the future, Sara continued. About all the kids still waiting. Still scared and alone like we were. And we want to help. Really help. Ren spoke up, voice stronger than it had been months ago. Sara's going to study xenobiology. Learn the science behind cross-species family dynamics. And I want to work with rescue services. Find the ones everyone else gives up on. We're going to build on what you started, Dad, Sara said. Make it bigger. Better. So no one has to be alone. David looked at them, these two dragons who'd transformed his life and now wanted to transform the galaxy. His eyes burned. I'm proud of you, he said simply. Both of you. Years later, David sat in the observation deck of the Cross-Species Family Center, a facility that now spanned 3 station levels. Through the window, he could see Sara giving a lecture to a group of prospective adoptive parents. Ren worked in the rehabilitation wing, coaxing trust from traumatized younglings with patience he'd learned from experience. The center helped hundreds now. Different species, different worlds, all finding family in unexpected places. David's hair had gone gray. His joints ached more than they used to. But watching his children help others find what they'd found, he never felt more fulfilled. A small Terran girl approached, holding hands with what looked like a tentacled aquarian juvenile. "Are you Mr. Chun?" she asked shyly. "I am. My teacher said you started all this. That you proved family doesn't have to match." David smiled. "I had good teachers too. Two very stubborn dragons who taught me that love is bigger than biology." The girl beamed and ran off with her sibling. Outside, stars wheeled in their ancient dance. And across the galaxy, families formed and reformed, different species choosing each other, building bonds that transcended DNA. All because one man looked at a scared dragon hatchling and chose to see not a monster, but a child who needed someone to show up. Sometimes changing the galaxy starts with one small act of compassion. Sometimes it starts with saying yes when everyone else says no. Sometimes it starts with a maintenance worker and a dragon that no one wanted, except him.